When someone joins a co-op or condo board, they are taking on the mantle of a fiduciary with two key obligations, the duty of care and the duty of loyalty. For the ordinary Joe, these concepts don't come up in everyday life, but for board members, they do, and the consequences of ignoring, violating, or plain misunderstanding what this means are serious and litigation worthy.
I'm Tina Larson with the Flonsson Group. We deliver done-for-you property management searches. You make the final call, we handle the rest. Add to that our seamless project management and strategic cost optimization. And you get a partner that empowers boards to make smart, confident decisions that move your building forward.
I'm Carol Ott with Habitat Magazine, and joining me today is Ben Flavin, partner at Braverman Greenspun, who will help break down what these duties look like in real life. Thanks for joining me today, Ben.
Sure. I'm happy to be here.
Before we dive into the specifics of these two duties, let's start at the beginning. When someone joins a board, what does it really mean to take on a fiduciary duty?
Well, as you mentioned, Carol, fiduciary duty is broken into two main parts, a duty of care and a duty of loyalty. Every board member on a co-op board is subject to those two duties. Duty of care is a duty to act in the best interest of the co-op and the shareholders of the co-op by making educated decisions.
I'm just going to jump in here. For the duty of care, I want to sort of talk about this in real life practice. So how does it actually relate to things boards have to do, like hiring contractors or rejecting apartment sales, or how does that work?
The main piece that a director should think about or consider is when making a decision, reviewing all the available information that's relevant to that decision. So when hiring a contractor or starting a capital project, for instance, at a co-op, this might be a very large expense that it will have a significant impact on the co-op. So the board members want to make sure that they are diligently kind of reviewing the parts of this. And that may be soliciting bids from multiple contractors, reviewing credentials from those contractors, getting references from neighbors or from their managing agent. It may also be referring the contract to the co-op's counsel in order to review it and make sure that the co-op is protected in that work. And then because it's a large expense, it may be important to have the co-op's accountant or the board's accountant review the terms and advise on how that may affect maintenance and the co-op's budget going forward. All of these things are important information, an important part of gathering information to make the best decision for the co-op.
But so bottom line, if you're going to, in terms of spending the co-op's money, for instance, the board can't just sort of meet together and say, oh, we have this project. Let's hire Joe, who our neighbor has suggested is a good guy, to go ahead with this project. That would not be considered doing your duty of care?
Well, I think that the important part is being sure that you have the information to make that decision. So just by hiring Joe, for instance, looking at Joe's prior work, looking at Joe's costs compared to other contractors, reviewing Joe's insurance. So hiring Joe may be completely acceptable, but there are factors into going for a board to look at before actually signing that contract with Joe.
So you've had experience with boards which rejected purchasers because the sale price wasn't high enough. How does that fit in with one of these duties? And tell me a little bit about what happened there.
Sure. So I think that the best example for duty of care when it comes to reviewing purchasers and sales of apartments in a co-op is when a board decides to reject a sale based on the sales price. What happens sometimes when a board is reviewing the purchase application, they'll look at the contract, and the contract has that sales price in it. And boards generally have an interest in sales prices conforming to both prior sales in the building and to sales in the neighborhood. Because that sales price does affect values of other shareholders' apartments.
Right.
So sometimes a board may reject, or a board will reject a purchase price or a purchase based on that price because they want that to be a higher price. One of the things that the board should do, if they are going to do that, is speak with your attorney. Let them know what your decision is going to be. Again, speak to your professionals that are related. One thing that we always recommend is to have a professional appraisal done for the apartment, so you have an idea of what that apartment actually is valued at.
So let me just ask you, if the board, in considering the application, decides that the purchase price is too low, in making that decision, do they violate their duty of care?
No, they don't violate their duty of care as long as they are, again, going through that process to determine, to collect the facts to make that decision for the co-op. So, there are factors that fall into that determining a price for an apartment. And the co-op board should be actively determining those factors do apply in this situation, and they're making the decision based on the available information and what's in the best interest of both the co-op and the other shareholders in the co-op.
But I assume, I'm just going to jump in, I assume that if they're not really very careful, that the person who's selling, or perhaps somebody's going to sue them.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no, that can happen. I think the board has to have that information in order to make the best decision. They have to have a strong reason and a good reason for why they've made that decision, and that is a defensible action by a co-op board. As long as they can show that they've gone through the process to make a decision that's in the best interest of the co-op.
Okay, so the key point is that they have to go through a process and document. It can't just be that a 2-bedroom sold for $700,000 6 months ago, and therefore it should sell for at least $700,000 today.
Right. It's more complicated than that. Correct. Right. There are other pieces, and the board does have to do that diligent review of it.
Okay, so moving on to duty of loyalty. Is that where conflict of interest comes up?
Yeah. So duty of loyalty is exactly that. It's conflict of interest and self-dealing. So a board member has a duty to be loyal to the co-op as a board member of the co-op, which means not putting their interests ahead of the interests of the co-op. And sometimes that's difficult. Some real life examples of a duty of loyalty in a co-op would be, a professional working on a board or serving on a board, but also has a profession that intersects with co-ops in real estate. So potentially a real estate broker who may want to sell an apartment or represent a buyer or a seller in a building, typically a seller, which may conflict with their ultimate their role as a board member. That could be, typically what we want to see in a situation like that. Ultimately, in a situation such as that, we try to discourage board members from assuming those roles and assuming or taking on a business interest in the co-op, especially if they are on the board. But when it does happen, we advise that particular board member to recuse themselves from all relevant decisions to that particular sale.
So would that mean if I'm on the board and I'm a contractor of some sort, and my building needs to hire my company's work, and I submit a bid, and now it comes time for the board to choose the contractor, you're saying I, as that board member, need to recuse myself from that decision making?
Sure. I mean, what I'm saying is, first, I'd recommend the board don't consider that bid. But if the board does decide that the contractor or that board member contractor is an eligible bidder, then what I would say is that the board member should recuse themselves from any sort of decision about the contract itself, the bid, but also if that person is accepted going forward, the board member should not be involved in any sort of decisions or discussions regarding the work, except for the person's capacity as the contractor in that situation, not as a board member.
And how does that work for the broker? Let's say you've got a broker board member.
Yeah, so the broker has an interest in the sale going through. And the way that would work with a broker is ultimately a seller purchaser would submit an application to sell the apartment to the board. The board typically, reviews the application and interviews the purchaser. So the broker board member would be required to sit out of all of that discussion leading up to the interview and, of course, the interview itself.
So it's one way of completing your duties of loyalty and the two duties. Should board members then recuse themselves from all decisions that they may be personally involved in? Is that one way of keeping things running smoothly and not getting into legal hot water?
Yeah, that's one way. One way to do that. Unfortunately, in a co-op, typically board members also live in a building. So it can be complicated. It can be complicated decisions to make. Obviously there are times when flip taxes, the board has to increase maintenance and maybe change a flip tax in a co-op. All those things affect board members personally, obviously, as shareholders in the co-op. But at the same time, if there are decisions regarding family members or specific units, apartments, board members' apartments, money, expenses of the co-op, those are the times when the board members, if they are personally affected, should recuse themselves from those decisions.
So sort of to bring this to a conclusion, if you were advising a brand new board director on what's the smartest way that they can protect themselves and their building, what would you say? What would be some of your advice? My
advice is, when you're serving as a board member, to remember that your duty is to serve the co-op, the best interest of the co-op in the shareholders, and to not treat the co-op itself as a business opportunity, or at least your membership on the board as a business opportunity.
I think that's really good advice.
Yeah.
All right, Ben Flavin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Carol.